Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the University of Nebraska at Omaha and Consider This. Consider this, the initiative and referendum process in Nebraska, is it alive and well, or is it in critical condition and in need of surgery? Quick surgery, drastic surgery. My guest this week will tell you what they think. Doug Kagan is with the Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. He is joined by another Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom member and its spokesperson, Marian Kaiser, and Andrew Sullivan of the Nebraska Libertarian Party. I want to thank you for joining us again. You've been on before, Andrew. Doug, you've been on before. I think one of the most confusing things in the state of Nebraska, and there are lots of confusing things, is exactly what it takes to get some sort of petition issue, referendum or initiative, on the ballot in the state of Nebraska. How many signatures it takes, what are the rules, and I guess it depends on what judge you take it before, doesn't it, Doug?
Yes, it does. The legislature since the 1980s has restricted our petition rights, added more rules and regulations, doubled the number of signatures required to push an initiative petition through for ballot access, so that now it's almost impossible to run a successful petition drive to get it on the ballot. So that's why our group thinks the petition process here needs drastic reconstructive surgery.
We should say that the group you're talking about is a coalition that includes Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom, the Nebraska Libertarian Party, and some other individuals, and may well grow. And it's one of at least two possible efforts in the state that are going to try and tackle this problem. Marian, I think it came to fore how frustrating it is in the last time Nebraskans tried to put a ballot issue on, and that had to do with gambling.
Yes.
But people really felt that, many people who signed the petition and those that didn't get a chance to, felt that they should have a right to change the Nebraska Constitution to allow this form of gambling. But there were petitions, there were petition gatherers.
There were more than enough signatures, and I think the frustration came from the fact that while there were more than enough signatures, the courts decided that it could not go on the ballot because they are defining the one subject rule very, very narrowly. And people on both sides of the issues, people for the gambling, people against the gambling, both felt cheated they felt cheated of the opportunity to vote for it if they wanted it on the ballot, to vote for or against.
The one issue or one subject clause that rules petitions getting on the ballot in Nebraska is just one of many, many rules. And I know as a libertarian you don't like too many rules and certainly not too many taxes, but how do the libertarians look at something like this?
On our issue, with libertarians, we've had the issue of trying to petition a party onto the ballot. I mean, onto
so the numbers
state.
game has been driving you nuts for years.
So we got serious. We've challenged it before, and we've had some successes, but it's a different process. And with the petition process we have in Nebraska, unless you know what criminal law is, civil law is, constitutional law is, you don't know what you're signing. And some people, once these petition processes get started, the judges don't like what they're seeing. And on the other end, people are beginning reluctant to sign petitions, and trying to get access to the people to sign the petitions in the first place is just as well as become difficult. For the Libertarian Party, we've been a little bit more fortunate to have some more access, but in something with initiative or a referendum, the mere count of signatures is a time-consuming process because you need so many more.
But the issue is, in order to have a petition process, you have to have some sort of verification. But that, and I don't think anyone takes issue with that. Maybe some of the, the minutia of the process, or what little T's can be crossed and I's can be dotted. But there are bigger issues, and I don't think if you went around the state, you could find any more than a handful of people that could tell you what percent of registered and who sits and what sits have to be available on petitions to get on the ballot. I mean, what is the deal?
Well, you almost have to be a Philadelphia attorney to figure out what you need to do for ballot access for a petition. The two main roadblocks, as Andrew said, is a single subject, and secondly, the number of signatures on most of the petition drives has been doubled, effectively from about 55,000 to over 110,000 because the legislature and then the courts verified this, that the number of signatures you need has to be a percentage of the electors or the registered voters, whereas before it was like a percentage of the number of votes for governor during the last election.
Last election.
And we think the legislature did that premeditatively.
Well,
So-
the legislature has a history of trying to limit the petition process. I mean, rightly or wrongly, that's a fact. They do have a history.
Yes, they do.
They are ignoring two factors. The state legislature does this consistently. One of the things that we have is in the state of Nebraska, you can register to vote easily on any, when you go into driver's set, driver's license and so forth, you can register to vote. The circumstance is that there are millions of people who registered to vote who will never actually show up at the ballot box. And so we're trying.
That's a shame, but
so that pushes one number in one direction as far as getting a percentage of signers. And the other end, trying to verify signatures. A lot of people will say that 100,000 signatures have been turned in, or 80,000 signatures have been turned in. Well, it may turn up that 1 out of 4 of those signatures is no good. So 25% of that, off of 80,000, you're cut down already down to 60,000, and still have to acquire more to actually get the issue on the ballot.
But the main point is, if you go back, and we did research on the legislature.
You did
we
quite
got-
a bit of historical research on
We
the
dug-
changes and.
We dug down into the basement of the state
Okay,
capitol.
ought zero for putting the petition process into being was 1898.
Right, that's when it started, and the Nebraska Constitutional Convention in 1920 and 21 verified that petition process. And we went over the legislative debates at that time and found out that those people wanted the petition process to be as free and easy as possible. And then in 1934, when they initiated the unicameral legislature, George Norris and his followers, the progressives, publicly stated that they wanted the people of Nebraska to be the virtual second house of the legislature. That's why we've named our effort Nebraska Second House, because we believe that the voters, the citizens, the taxpayers should be the second house of the legislature.
And so you feel that this kind of legislative intent and constitutional intent is being violated.
Oh yes, anymore, what constitutes the second house of the legislature is not the voters who can freely use the petition process, but rather the lobbyists. Special
You
interest
think the
groups.
second house is in effect right now the lobbyists, the 400 some lobbyists that are paid to have their way, or their corporations or whatever interests they represent.
They have that influence.
So but in order to change the petition process, you must do it with a petition. And you
That's
must
right.
do it to meet these mythical figures. So you've got a lot of work cut out for you. You're gearing up for the general election, well, let's just say the next presidential election. That makes it easy to remember,
Right.
right? So what do you have to do?
A lot of work. We have to, we are in the process of laying the groundwork, establishing a statewide network. One of the requirements is that you have to have signatures from 2/5 of the counties, which means 38 counties, a minimum of 38 counties.
So you
We
have
would
to
like
have
more.
visited and acquired enough signatures, but that it also has to be percentage of the county.
Right, 5%. You have to have a minimum of 5% of registered voters from a minimum of 38 counties. Now, that is not going to get you the required number of signatures. You do have to have more than that percentage.
But the idea
total.
is to show a broad base of at least
Right,
support.
broad-based support. Right, and it is going to be a very difficult process to get this petition through. And sometimes it is kind of amusing. People will say, well, we're going to be circulating a petition to clean up the petition process. Yeah.
It
But
seems
this is what
strange.
we have to do.
And it's a daunting task, but you feel that what is the 19 out of how many issues have actually come before the Nebraska voters? 50 some?
Since 1914, there were 56 petition issues on the ballot, and the people have approved only 19 of them.
And those include the petitions in more liberal times. And I don't mean liberal politically, I mean in liberal
numbers.
liberal numbers.
Yeah.
So it's not something done helter-skelter anyway. But in
It's
order
not.
to get things changed the way you'd like them to be changed, and we'll discuss what those changes are before we even talk about your other kind of issue that you're interested in, you have to go through this process, and you're not quite sure at any given time whether you're close or no cigar, even though you might have raw signatures. How many do you believe at this point in time, if you want to get something on the ballot, how many valid signatures does one need?
Over 110,000 is the ballpark figure, and of course it depends on the exact number of registered voters, but it's in the area of 110,000, and to ensure that you have that many valid signatures, you need some leeway, and so
Need
we're
pad.
looking,
Right.
we're looking at 130, 140, 150 or more, and that's a lot of signatures, and we need a lot of volunteers. We need many people outstate who are willing to help us with this. It is going to be a great deal of work, but I think it can be done.
So you've got to build a network. I mean, this is, there are also rules and regulations about when you can turn it in, how long the drive can be. So you have to get some timing down. Even after you get your network, there's timing issues.
Well, we started to organize last summer because this is going to be a 2-year process. And a lot of people think if you have a petition drive, all you have to do is type up the petition, run down to a photocopy place and run off a few thousand copies and go out to the street corner and get signatures. It doesn't work that way. Phase 1 is organization. Phase 2, you have to fund it. And if you cannot successfully complete those 2 phases, then you will have no petition drive.
Now, you were recently involved in another petition drive, so you know how hard it is to get people organized and agreeable and everything. And
Yes.
that was the, help me out on this.
1085
1085.
repeal.
Right. You want to explain?
Well,
Just briefly, just to kind of,
briefly, that was a referendum petition drive, and we needed to do it in 90 days.
and 1085 was,
That raised our taxes 4 different ways last year.
that was the one where they talk about the dirty 30
Dirty 30
legislatures,
state
at least the
senators.
talk, some of the radio talk shows,
Right.
and I'm not saying you're dirty out there, but
And I think that example showed very clearly how hard it is to get things organized in 90 days. There was no statewide network existent at that time. We had people who were interested in helping the campaign, but we could not get sufficient funding or organizations set up, established throughout the state in order to successfully complete that petition drive.
you know, I still have a little mini disc. When I was doing some work for Nebraska Public Radio, and I came to your first, when you kicked off signing your petitions for that repeal 1085, and you were working with Nebraska Taxpayers Association. You've since kind of had a falling out. They may go their own way on this, but it just demonstrated to me, because these things have to be so organized and so tight and so well orchestrated, that, I mean, it's even hard to get all people to agree on some of the details. I mean, it's a tough, you're not talking about an easy task, even just organizing this network, are you?
No, it is. It's very
No,
difficult.
you just tried to organize a whole party.
Right, and you try to get the grassroots movement into it and try to get people involved. I mean, just the average person is going to want to know more about the process before they get involved.
They want to know more about you. Are you
Right.
viable? Are you a bunch of crackpots? I mean,
Right.
you know, it's a whole education process, even after you've organized.
And that's before you even start to sit down and deal with the petition.
And wording. And
Wording. Another problem is time issues. We're all volunteers here. We don't get paid for doing any of this. And so we have to kind of budget our time on how much we can do. And we understand that everybody else who gets involved is in the same boat. They have jobs they have to tend to, that families and other responsibilities. And so it takes a great deal of commitment to be able to put this into your life to a significant degree.
And if that's not enough, this isn't the only thing you want to do.
That's right.
You would like to have what is referred to as the Tabor Amendment, which was passed in Colorado, and you'd like to have a Nebraska version of it. And so we're shifting gears here, but it's still going to require this awesome effort. And you might want to explain what the Tabor Amendment is.
The Tabor Amendment, as passed in Colorado and as we would like it passed here, would require a vote of the people for every new tax imposed or every hike in a tax that already exists at both the state or local level. It's been in effect in Colorado since 1992. That's 11 years, and it's worked very well. It's cut their rate of taxation and spending.
Yeah, and it's actually not even been, they don't willy-nilly, vote to keep the things being raised. I mean, they've allowed raises in taxes and new taxes when the situation's warranted.
That's right. At the local level, about between 35 and 45% of the tax issues on the ballot have passed. So people still would have the right to raise their taxes if they think there's a valid reason for it.
There's a kind of a formula for taxation or increasing taxes involved in this Tabor Amendment too.
Yes, the formula is something like
Just give it in general.
Well, it depends on the percentage of increase in the population,
inflation.
inflation, and they can only keep a certain proportion of excess surplus revenue in their treasury.
And then in Colorado, they've actually given sales tax rebates.
That's right, back to the people.
Can you imagine that?
Oh, I'd love it.
What a concept.
We'd all love it.
We are in difficult times in Nebraska. You know, we can debate whether the spending was uncontrollable during the good times and they went crazy down in Lincoln and at every other subdivision. And you can argue how much we should cut taxes or cut spending this year. I mean, everyone will have a slightly different opinion, but the majority of people are concerned about those 4 things that were raised last year for tax areas. And do you think they're ready to do something kind of drastic like this?
Not right now. They look like they want to raise our taxes some more and leave the 4 tax hikes that were supposed to be temporary last year, leave them on a permanent basis.
No, do you think the people are ready to take some drastic action?
I think people want drastic action. If anyone's familiar with the economist Arthur Laffer and his tax curve, they'll realize that raising taxes in a bad economy is just going to kilter the economy more. And if we don't put a brake on those taxes and the spending on it, we're not going to be able to pull the economy out. And those taxes affect us locally, affect the local economy as well as they do the state economy or the federal economy. If you have those taxes high, it cuts into people's ability to be in part of the economy. They simply don't spend.
You know, I was just talking to someone that owns a tobacco outlet here. Now, you can get into the morality of smoking or taxes are good, detrimental to the amount of cigarettes smoked in the state. But this is a businessman, and it's legal to sell tobacco. And he's shown since that last increase that his business has dropped 22%. Now, he said, I don't think 22%, there's been a 22% cutback in smokers. I mean, just the odds are, given the addiction that it is, it hasn't happened. He says Council Bluffs is getting the business, internet sales.
Yeah.
So that's just one, and you can say, I hope they tax him to death, but that's just one little store, or he has a small chain of stores. That's one situation where raising the taxes immediately impacts business.
The legislatures don't understand that when you raise taxes, the consumer has the ability and the investor has the ability to move their income elsewhere. And that's what I think escapes most of the legislatures.
Assuming their income isn't getting cut back by their retirement's being cut because their 401k went
south, yeah.
I mean, it's a very complicated issue.
Right. Our main point is that we had a surplus of revenue in the 90s. Times were good. The legislature overspent. They didn't keep anything much in reserve. They are the ones responsible for our bulging deficit that's getting larger every day and will get larger every year because of the automatic hikes in spending. So we feel it should be their responsibility to cut the budget sufficiently instead of putting the tax burden back on the taxpayers.
Well, whether or not they'll do that remains to be seen. But isn't it ambitious enough to consider putting a petition out to change the petition process, let alone to add a whole new amendment on taxing limitations? I mean, I'm just asking, a little strategy. Is this a good thing or not?
Well, you have
put 2 out at one time?
You have to fix the process first. There are a lot of different groups out there would like to have a lot of different petitions for different causes and reasons, but we have to restore the petition process to its original intent before anybody starts their individual group petitions, or else nobody's petitions will get
I guess
through.
what I'm asking, I was under the impression that maybe you try to do these things at the same time.
That's still in the
Up in the air?
discussion process at this point.
But what are some of the initial gut pro and cons of doing two versus just the one on petitions?
Well, one of the pros would be if you had circulators having two petitions, then, you know, you're kind of you're piggybacking, and so you're not doing the same thing twice at two different time frames. One of the drawbacks is trying to get people to understand that you are doing two petitions and why you're doing two petitions, and understand this is what goes with this petition, this is what goes with that petition. Because it does take time to sit down and explain this to people. You know, everyone's busy and with their own lives, and they don't always pay attention to exactly what's what.
If the Nebraska Taxpayers Association, which is kind of trying to decide in this near future whether they're going to do a petition drive on petitions and or one on tax limitations, if you were to have two going at once, how would people remember which one they signed? I mean, you can say, well, we're first, or we're, you know, but the bottom line is, united you might stand, divided you might just have a lot of papers.
We began our effort last summer, and I think it's pretty well known throughout the state by now that our group is doing the petition restoration petition
The
drive.
second house
The
project.
Nebraska's second house, that's right. And if there were two going simultaneously, I think that would only cause confusion among people, because when you have like or similar petitions circulating at the same time, people are going to get confused and they won't know if they signed or signed two or which one they signed.
Yeah, and and they could disqualify. I mean, we're still confused exactly, you know, to a comma or a dot, you know, what will qualify or disqualify a signature. It seems to be pretty set, but it can go with the wind. I mean, I think that's part of the thing that kind of bothers me. I have never signed petitions, okay, and it's not because I don't think I have the right to. I just, as a journalist, don't want to be on record. You know, I vote, I register to vote, but I don't like to tip my hand anymore just out of fairness, because I have to talk to both sides of an issue. So, but I would feel that if I did, and maybe when I stop being a journalist and just a regular person, which I don't know if I'll ever be, but a regular person, if I do sign one, I want to know exactly what I'm signing, how my signature will count, will it count, that I'm doing the right thing. And because there's so many questions up in the air, don't you think that sort of undermines the whole process in people's minds? In other words, I'm not going to get, until they figure this whole thing out, I'm not going to get involved in any petitions. I'm not going to help on a petition drive. I'm not going to sign one.
I think you have a point. I think you have a point. Now, that's one of the reasons I think we need to get information about what we're doing out to the public, with the help of, you know, some of the media like you and so on. It is helping inform the public about what is going on, and I think that is a crucial piece, and we do have to put in a lot of time working on that, just getting the information out there.
I think one thing that's lost in the petition process, people think they're voting when they're signing something. It's not a matter of voting for something, it's a matter of giving the democratic process to work. If you put an issue out there and it gets on the ballot, great. It gives a chance for the society to debate it and vote on it.
In other words, you don't have to be 100% for it to sign it. You can say, you know,
You could even
I
be
don't know how
against
I
it.
even feel about it. I don't even know how I'd vote for it. But I think, let's take the gambling issue, the casino issue. There are a number of people, I think, that signed it because, by gosh, they think we ought to gamble. Or they think, well, we've waited too long, like we did with Powerball, we might as well get in on it. I mean, various things. But there are also people that say, I don't really know how I feel right now, but I'd like it to go on the ballot. I'd like to generate that public discussion. And they're not quite sure what, as you say, what they're exactly doing.
And I think that is an important point. People need to realize when they sign the petition, what they are saying is, I would like to see this issue on the ballot and let the people have their say about it. I may be against it, and I'll sign the petition, but if it gets on the ballot, I want to vote no.
You know, one of the things I've noticed with the unicameral, and I suppose it's any legislative body, and this is not a criticism per se, but maybe it's just the way we're used to things working. And, you know, we go about our business, we read maybe the paper, watch TV, listen to the radio, and kind of keep up on what's going on. But it's a pretty controlled process. And in a way, for good reason, otherwise it would be crazy. And, you know, unless you can go down and testify, and you know, I know people that have called their state senators, and in the first few weeks of the session, they're very busy, and they say, I don't get my phone calls answered. And I think ultimately you will, for most senators, or get a staffer to call, but they feel left out of the process, and particularly on certain issues. Maybe tax limitation might be one of them, or listening to me about what I think about those tax increases. They're not listening to me. This is one of those processes that potentially, and I don't know, you'd have to do research, keeps faith with government, I think. Even if you never sign a petition and you never vote for one, you feel at least, you know, you have some power in addition to that vote.
Right.
It's one of the few ways that the citizen has to connect with the government and communicate what they're thinking. And I mean, that's the whole part of the petition process. But I think right now we suffer a problem where a lot of people don't have that faith. They don't think that anyone's listening anymore, and they just stop voting, they stop participating.
We see a lot of apathy and indifference. Simply like Andrew says, people think the legislators are not listening to them. So what we've done is we've designed a multi-page packet that tells people numerous ways to contact their state senator. Fax, email, letter, phone call, how to get through to them the quickest way, and even how the right way to write your state senator, the right way to call your state senator.
But by the way, we'd also like you to get involved in this effort. And,
oh, of course.
But I understand.
But my point
but you're saying
is,
it's not as hopeless as sometimes it
no,
seems.
because see, tax-paying citizens, there's a big, huge, amorphous group of us, but we don't have as much
We are pretty
clout.
amorphous, aren't we?
We don't have the clout of the special interest groups that have smaller numbers. And the reason is taxpayers are not organized well enough. If we had the organization of, say, the NSEA or the Bankers Lobby, we'd have a whole lot more clout in the legislature.
Well, and speaking of clout, as we wind up this half hour, why don't you, we'll be glad if you call to give you this information. Why don't you tell them the website where they can get more information on this effort?
Effort
The
is
Nebraska's Second House project.
It's not quite up yet, but it will be soon. It's www.netaxpayers, that's all one word, .org, or they can email us at ncf, that's North Cat Frank, at phonet, PHONET.com.
And give us a call, we'll give you that information. And I want to thank you so much. And if you'd like to recommend this show to other people, or let them see past shows, go on your internet to unotv.unomaha.edu. Thanks for joining us this week. Thank you, Doug, Marion, and Andrew, and we'll see you next week.